Content warning. This video is not made for kids. It contains fictional depictions of mental illness, fictional violence, and fictional abuse. The fictional characters in this story are heavily afflicted by the things that I have spelled out to you, and some of the inner monologue seems to suggest that they should be getting hurt like this, but that is absolutely not the case. Me portraying this ABUSE, or mental illness, is meant to show the audience how the illness, or ABUSE, feels inside of the mind of the afflicted person, so they can sympathize and maybe stop themselves from following a similar pattern in the future. Be careful if you are easily triggered. You're most likely about to enter the mind of someone who is heavily afflicted by illness and ABUSE. Viewer discretion is advised. The next part went by so fast, it felt like a surreal, otherworldly scene straight out of a hopeful dream. Dr. Morris explained the situation to the 911 operator, while Gregory just sniffled and hiccuped beside her. "I need to get here right now. He's been violent to him. Apparently bit him earlier today. He's saying he's scared she's gonna beat him once they get back home. I don't feel safe leaving him alone with her." Then came the thumping of boots, the yells of his mother rising in pitch as she tried to stand her ground against the officers. "Ma'am, please just calm down and put your hands behind your back." "No, that's my son in there! You need to bust this door down right now! I have no idea what that lady is doing to him! I think she might be a child predator!" "I'm sure that Gregory isn't being hurt. You just need to put your hands behind your back or you'll be charged with resisting arrest." Arrest? You can't arrest me! He needs me! You can't take me away from him! Gregory shrank behind the desk as she started screeching at the top of her lungs, a scuffle banging around in the hall as she refused to comply, hurling every single curse word Gregory had ever heard at the officers. By the end of it, she was dragged away, her protests fading like dying thunder. "Okay, Gregory, you're gonna be fine. She's gone," Dr. Morris reassured him, lingering around his hiding spot. Eventually, another officer knocked on the door, calling from the other side. "Is he all right in there?" "Yes, he just seems shaken up," Dr. Morris said, unlocking the door and letting him inside. A red-haired man wearing a padded police uniform leaned beneath the desk where Gregory was hiding, offering him a small smile. "Hey, are you all right, little guy?" Gregory quickly tried to wipe the tears out of his eyes, but couldn't do much to stem the flow. "Please don't make me go back home," he bleated feebly. "She's gonna be so mad." I know, you're not gonna have to go home," the officer reassured him, gesturing for him to get closer. "Just come on out, little guy. We gotta find out what she's been doing to you." As the officer gently escorted him out of the room, Gregory could hear Dr. Morris telling a second officer about how he was trying to run away, how the bite got there, how suspicious his mother had been leading up to the part where Gregory was finally separated from her. The first officer stayed with him in the waiting room, the glass door not doing much to hide the struggle that was going on down on the main floor. Gregory covered his ears as he heard his mother hollering at the policemen, threatening lawsuits and coming up with every single little excuse for the bite wound that she could ever think of. But once they got her into the back of a police cruiser, the first officer told him, "Okay, Gregory, we're going to take you to the hospital now. They'll check you over and see what's going on with that bite mark. It looks like it might be infected." Gregory went rigid, taking a few steps back. I'm not supposed to go to the hospital. They're really expensive. My mom's going to be mad." "Your mom can't be mad at you," the officer said confidently, "and she's probably not going to be alone with you for a very long time." When they stepped outside, flashing red and blue lights blinded him for a moment. Once his vision cleared, the officer guided him forwards, opening the door to his vehicle and saying, "All right, just jump in here." His heart plunged down into his gut. Am I going to jail?" "What? No. the cop said hurriedly, scratching at his curly red hair. "You're not in trouble or anything. I'm just going to drive you to the hospital." Gregory still felt reluctant, but he probably didn't have a choice in this matter. So, hoping that it wasn't a trick, Gregory climbed inside and let him shut the door behind him. Even though the officer said that he wasn't going to jail, sitting in a police car was making him nervous. That feeling was amplified by the metal grate that separated him from the driver. The black, plasticky seats gave off the faint smell of alcohol, marking how many drunken drivers had been contained back here. Gregory's nose was only barely able to poke up over the door to see out the window, the alternating red and blue flashes hurting his eyes. The whole vehicle rocked back and forth as the officer got in the driver's seat. "Okay, do you have your seatbelt on?" "Yeah." And so they were off. Gregory stared out the window in a sort of trance, watching the office building getting smaller and smaller as they navigated through the busy streets. A part of him hadn't really recognized what was happening around him, like he was expecting at any moment to be woken up by the angry pounding on his bedroom door. But that didn't happen. It didn't happen when the police officer pulled into the parking lot in front of the hospital. It didn't happen when he helped him out of his seat and took him into the air-conditioned, sterilized halls. And it still didn't happen even once the policeman was done explaining the situation to a lady behind the desk, the same exact lady that Gregory had seen the morning when he escaped the Pizzaplex. Gregory just followed instructions as they put him inside one of the examination rooms, the same brightly colored herds of cartoonish animals surrounding him like before. Gregory stayed stiff and quiet as the police officer waited with him for the doctor to arrive, dreading the moment that his mother's furious voice would come booming through the door. There was no way he was going to be able to get away with this. What if nobody believed him? What if they got frustrated when they saw that he got in so much trouble she had hurt him? Or even worse, what if they didn't care and gave him back to her? Gregory tried to reassure himself with the memory of how people had reacted to the animatronics being abused in the Pizzaplex. Adults would help him, right? They had to. Freddy said so. He was startled by a knock on the door, nearly giving himself whiplash from how violently he jumped back. "You can come in," the officer said. Gregory felt his mind retreating further into his skull as the doctors began to look him over, getting him to take off the sweltering jacket so he could show them which parts of him hurt. They used a few sanitized towelettes to wipe off the globs of makeup his mother had used to paint over his bruises and scrapes, the officer taking pictures and documenting every single injury. The entire time, Gregory's eyes were glued to the floor, the dread making him feel sick. If they didn't believe him and just sent him back home, if they thought that he was a bad kid and said that he deserved to go back with her. "Okay, I'm going to put a few more stitches in your ear," a doctor told him, "and we'll get you some shots to take care of that infection and get that fever down. You're doing really well already, Gregory." Gregory just let them do whatever they wanted, trying to stay still as they sat him down on the wax paper of the bed. There was no way this was actually happening. No way. His mom was about to come after him. He knew it. They wouldn't be able to hide him from her forever. She was going to be so mad. What if she pumped soap into his mouth until he told the officers that he had been lying? What if she locked him in the bathroom for the rest of his life? What if she convinced the officers that he was actually making it all up? Hey, you're all right, Gregory. You're doing really well," the doctor said softly, handing him a box of tissues. "We're going to take good care of you, Gregory. You're going to be fine." He really wanted to believe her, but the thrum of panic absolutely refused to leave his brain. Just as the doctor was done giving him more ointment for the new stitches, a different officer leaned in through the door and gestured to the red-headed one to meet out in the hallway with her. "Okay, is that it?" the doctor asked him. "Are you hurting anywhere else?" He blinked up at her a few seconds, the numbness still bouncing from goosebump to goosebump. I'm fine," he croaked. "Do you need some water?" He only realized then how thirsty he was, but what if they thought that he was being annoying? He shook his head. Are you sure? I don't really mind getting you some. Gregory paused, weighing his options, before finally admitting, okay, yeah, I'd like some. She didn't get mad or anything, instead retrieving an unopened bottle of water just for him like it didn't bother her. He drained the entire thing in less than a minute, setting the empty bottle down as the two officers re-entered and approached him. The female officer leaned down to get at his eye level, telling him, "All right, Gregory, you're going to be staying with a relative for a while, okay? She was more than happy to take you in. She's going to take care of you and make sure that you're safe. Do you have any toys or clothes that you want to bring with you?" "No, I guess not." "Okay, well, if you think of anything, just tell your relative and she'll go get them for you." A blink later, and all the adults were sneaking back out the door, the doctor saying, "We'll come get you when she comes to pick you up. You can just lie down and rest until then, okay?" And then he was alone. He stayed perfectly motionless at the edge of his bed, the ticking of the clock and the distant murmurs soaking into his eardrums as his mind tried to catch up to what was going on around him. Was it really over? Was he actually never going to see his mom again? He still wasn't quite sure if the police could pull that off. He continued to wait for his mother to storm in and drag him back to the house, all the while convincing the police officers that he was a liar, that this was all just a big misunderstanding. But it didn't happen. He scratched at the bite mark over his arm, wincing at the layers of bandages they had strapped over it. His body was covered in unpleasant sensations, every single tender wound following the beat of his pulse. A relative. He was going to be staying with a relative. Even though that thought should make him feel relieved, he still couldn't bring himself to let his guard down. What if the relative took his mother's side? What if she was even worse? What if she took one look at him and rejected him, telling the officers to take him to a creepy orphanage instead? He wanted to stay with Freddie. Even though he was pretty sure that's not how the real world works, Gregory still wanted to be returned to Freddie, even if it meant that he would have to go back to the Pizzaplex. Gregory shifted uncomfortably as his mind finally caught up to how horrible his body felt. His mom had been so mad at him she hadn't let him eat anything today, so by now Gregory was terribly hungry and shaky, both inside and out. He was exhausted too, his eyelids sticky and his head buzzing like it was full of bees. He had been up for 2 days at this point, and he wanted so badly to just find a place to rest, to pass out and forget all of the horrible things that had happened to him in the last 46 hours. He began to tip sideways, the room around him fading, the examination table feeling strikingly comfortable. Gregory shot back up right at a knock on the door. Even though he had been jump-scared by a knock at least 4 times in the last few hours, that still didn't make his heart stop racing as the female police officer nudged the door open and told him, "All right, Miss Anderson is here. She's ready for you to come meet her." Miss Anderson. He didn't recognize the name at all, which made him stay firmly where he was on the bed. "Hey, it's all right," the officer told him, trying to coax him out of the room. "She seems very nice. She was just as worried about you as the rest of us are." Who is she?" Gregory was mostly just stalling, but the officer didn't show any signs of frustration. She's your mother's cousin, so your first cousin once removed, I believe," she clarified. But she agreed to take care of you in a heartbeat. I promise that you'll be safe with her." Gregory couldn't think of any other way to give himself more time to adjust, so he hopped down from the bed and kept his head low as he followed the doctor through the shining white halls of the hospital. A strong sense of déjà vu came over him for pretty obvious reasons. The buzzing of fluorescent lights tickled his ears, the smell of chemicals squirming around in his nose. The doctor opened up a door to the waiting room, the same cushioned seats holding a variety of other patients, most of which were children huddled next to their parents. One of the kids glanced up, their mouth dropping open, tapping their parent and pointing at him. Their parent pushed their arm back down and whispered, "Don't be rude." Gregory and the doctor passed the strangers by, entering the main lobby of the hospital, dodging around various adults wearing clean white coats, as well as a few patients hobbling their way from one side to the other. Afternoon light filtered through the windows, bathing everyone in light amber shades. Gregory could not immediately recognize which one of these grown-ups were Miss Anderson. He went over face after face, not finding anything familiar, keeping himself as close as he could to the doctor's leg as he waited for his mother to rear up out of nowhere and take him away. There she is! The doctor tapped his shoulder, gesturing to someone who was making their way over to them. The relative had to stop to let someone on a stretcher pass by, and a sense of vague familiarity flickered over him as she finally got close enough to let her voice carry over the commotion of the main lobby. "Hello there, Gregory," the new person, Miss Anderson, said through an anxious smile. "Are you feeling all right?" Gregory gave a slight nod, hiding further behind the doctor's legs. Miss Anderson's features were much rounder and softer than his mother's, two small braids sweeping past her short hair to tie off at the back, the ends of each strand bearing a bright turquoise color that matched the jewels in her silvery earrings. She kept her slender hands close to her chest, staying out of his personal space as she went on. You probably don't remember me. You were pretty little when I first met you." Her voice, it was familiar. He swore that he had heard it recently. Like a light bulb blinking on, recognition connected in the back of his head. "Crystal," he said. Her face lit up. "Yes, you're right. I'm Crystal." The doctor shuffled closer to Crystal Anderson, whispering beside her ear in a way that made her expression twist a little, the smile fading and being replaced by shock and pity. Gregory stared down at the white tiles, scratching at the band-aids on his arm. "Okay, all right, I will," Crystal said, raising back to her normal volume. "Okay, Gregory, I'm going to take you home so you can get settled in. Do you want to stop and get anything to eat on the way?" His fear told him to say no, while his stomach disagreed. But he didn't want to bother Crystal enough that she gives up on him and drops him back off with his mother. He wobbled between the two options awkwardly, shrinking further into himself the longer the adults waited for his response. You don't have to if you don't want to?" He glanced up to see if he had given the answer that she wanted. Crystal, or Miss Anderson, it felt more normal just to call her Miss Anderson rather than her first name. It didn't look like she really believed him, but she said, "Okay, well, I'm hungry, so I'm gonna stop at Wendy's anyway." She turned to exit through the sliding glass doors. "Do you want me to hold your hand through the parking lot?" "No, I'm fine," he repeated, wringing his hands together and keeping his eyes on the floor. "All right, then. Just stay close," Miss Anderson said. "I'm gonna take you back to my home so you can get some rest." Rosy evening light glimmered through the swinging crepe myrtles, the activity of the parking lot bustling all around him. Miss Anderson wasn't forcing him to hold her hand, going at a pace that he could easily keep up with, glancing behind her every few seconds to make sure he was following. Every time a group of patients began to approach, Gregory switched to the opposite side of his new caretaker, hoping that people wouldn't recognize him and start staring at the abhorrent scars tracing his face. He found himself keeping a nervous eye out for his mother. Even though the police had arrested her, he just couldn't stop imagining her snatching him up and throwing him back into her gas-powered car to drive away with him. "All right, here we are," Miss Anderson said, making him stop. She fished a pair of keys out of her pocket, a car blinking with a resounding chirp. Gregory hadn't been sure what exactly he had been expecting, but her car actually looked like a huge improvement over his mother's. There were still a few dents marking the slender black frame, but the logo on the back marked it as an electric car, just like everyone else. Gregory?" He snapped out of it, realizing that Miss Anderson was holding the door open for him. Even though the interior looked neat and clean, he felt his heart skip a few beats as he remembered the highway. What if this was a trick? What if Miss Anderson was just acting nice because other people were watching? What if the moment that he stepped foot in her house, the yelling and hitting would start all over again? His ankles tensed, wanting to turn the other way and run, but Miss Anderson's genuine confusion and worry kept him from that instinct. "It's gonna be all right," Miss Anderson said, trying to comfort him with only her words. I know you've been through a lot, but I promise I'm not going to get angry at you, okay? You're safe with me." She laughed a little, twirling a strand of her braided hair. "Besides, they're going to be checking up with you pretty often, so if I start being horrible, you can just tell the police again and they'll find someone else to take care of you." That logic eased his anxiety long enough that Gregory sighed and climbed up into the back seat. The car didn't smell like alcohol. That was the first thing Gregory registered. Instead, the car smelled of peaches, the air inside fresh and cool enough to fight off the oppressive heat of the summer afternoon. When Miss Anderson turned the keys in the ignition, the engine gave a quiet, monotone hum rather than a gurgling whine. As it began to slip out of the parking spot, the seatbelt held him securely, the drive staying smooth and consistent the entire way. Perhaps all of these tiny details would not be noticed by someone who drove an electric car every day, but to Gregory, it was such a stark contrast that it immediately lightened his mood. If Miss Anderson had enough money to afford a normal car, maybe she wouldn't be so strict about what he could and could not eat. "Do you want the radio on?" Miss Anderson asked, making him blink in confusion. I don't know. Whatever you want is fine, I guess." "Well, yeah, but I want to know what you want," Miss Anderson said, turning on her blinker as she prepared to pull out onto the main road. "Do you want to listen to music?" Even though the question was simple, Gregory found himself fumbling around, trying to figure out which answer she would be least upset by. I don't know, just, yeah, music sounds fine, I guess, if you're okay with that." She turned a few dials while waiting for an opening on the road, letting the radio spin a web of music that Gregory had never gotten the chance to actually appreciate. Still, even though the bundle of notes and chords felt odd in his ears, he found himself relaxing a little as they passed intersection after intersection, sliding between lanes and taking corners as Miss Anderson directed the car towards their destination. The entire drive, Miss Anderson tapped the steering wheel to the beat, retaining the same light smile that she had worn in front of everyone else. He kept on examining her in the rearview mirror, expecting for her soft features to sharpen, for her foot to stomp down on the gas pedal until he promised to never speak bad about his mother again. But she didn't. She stayed the same, even though nobody was observing her. It was so bizarre, it almost made him miss what was going on outside. Like she promised, Miss Anderson pulled into a drive-thru, rolling down the window and leaning out to speak into the microphone. Soon, the warm, greasy smells of fast food wafted in, making his empty guts ache with increasingly loud growls. When they were finally handed their food, Miss Anderson turned around in her seat, offering him a wrapped cheeseburger. "Are you sure you don't want some? You sound pretty hungry back there." Gregory hesitated a bit longer, looking from her to the burger, wondering if it was some sort of trick. Then he carefully reached out and took it, retreating back to his seat as if he had stolen something from her. She just kept on smiling, facing forward and pulling back onto the main road. Once he was sure that it was safe, he unwrapped the gift and dug in, relief washing through his whole body as he ate. It was probably the best thing that he had ever tasted, second only to the lollipop. Miss Anderson was now taking directions that he didn't recognize, and as they went along, the usual progression of deteriorating homes did not come. He spotted wildflowers springing up outside of gardens and painted white front porches, the sidewalks free of weeds or cracks, barely a shingle out of place. There was the occasional unkept car or bending fence, but for the most part, it was clean. The other part that confused him was the children, or rather, the lack of them. He was used to seeing herds of kids messing around outside, playing fetch with their dogs, passing a basketball from one to the other, trying to escape the boredom within their homes. But here, he saw none of that. The only sign that the people here had children at all was the tiny rectangles of light seen from behind thin curtains, showing the screens of iPads and game consoles. They could afford that type of stuff here. Miss Anderson's car slowed down earlier than he expected. Before he knew it, she was pulling into the garage of a house that was just as well maintained as the ones around it, the hum of the engine dissipating like the end of a cicada's song. His thoughts zipped backwards a few seconds, going over the appearance of the home. It had been painted a bright sapphire blue, swirls of violets filling the trimmed garden in the front. His car door swung open, bringing his attention back to the present moment. When he lowered himself down to the concrete of the garage, he immediately took notice of the lack of garbage in the small space. There was a bin near the back corner, but gardening tools replaced the spots that he expected overflowing trash bags to take up, from a handheld rake to pointed shovels. Miss Anderson rolled the garage door shut, calling to him, "All right, let's get you settled down. Come on in." Much like Gregory's old house, this one had a painted wooden door that connected the garage to the main house. Miss Anderson had already unlocked it, holding it open for him to enter. Unsure of how long this politeness would last, Gregory complied, Miss Anderson taking the lead as they stepped through the threshold. Much like the car, the strongest sensation to him was rather the lack of a sensation. The house didn't smell like alcohol. The sickly sweet stench that he was so used to was nowhere to be found, replaced by the fresh scent of strawberries. And there was air conditioning, actual air conditioning. The room wasn't damp and hot with mold. It wasn't trying to bake him alive using the power of the sunbeams drifting in through the window. Instead, a chill circulated evenly through the room, making him sigh in relief. And maybe it was just the fact that the last Gregory had seen of his original house was the state of disarray it had been left in after his mother's celebration, but the lack of trash was becoming more and more appreciated by him with every second that passed. There wasn't heaping mounds of rotting banana peels and fly-covered chunks of expired green beans. He didn't see a single beer bottle in sight, the carpet vacuumed and fluffy, the kitchen sink completely empty of dirty dishes. Clean. That word just kept soaring through his head. Everything was so clean. Miss Anderson stepped out into the living room and pulled the string of a curvy fan, light spilling out over the room to brighten the features that he was taking in. A rocking chair and a leathery brown couch faced a mounted TV that was several years newer than the one sitting in his original house. The kitchen and the living room were opened up to each other, but rather than stairs that led up to a second floor, there was only a hallway at the back that he assumed led to the bedrooms. The home only had one floor, but the closeness of the walls felt cozy more than anything, especially since it wasn't streaked with mildew or stinking of beer. "Sorry, it's not really much, but hopefully this'll be enough to take care of you." Miss Anderson broke his trance, her nervousness not matching the state of the home at all. "No, it's great," Gregory whispered. "Okay, so, your room is going to be down the hall over there," Miss Anderson said, already making her way towards it. Again, he was surprised to see her flicking on the hallway lights as she went, chasing away the shadows in her path. She could keep the lights on in her house? Gregory was still recovering from that realization. He scurried after Miss Anderson, passing by each door as she pointed them out to him. This one's my room, this is the bathroom, that's just a closet for the vacuum, and..." She turned a corner, showing the way to the last one. "This'll be your room." He stayed where he was for a few moments, his eyes sliding over the patterns of polished caramel-colored wood. No rust on the hinges, no splinters near the edges. His room. "Well, go on," Miss Anderson encouraged him. He reached up to the cold handle, the latch giving way as he took his first look into his new life. It was like the room had been waiting all this time just for him. A bed frame, an actual bed frame, held up a mattress layered with sheets and blankets that tucked into the corners, a pillow waiting expectantly for someone to sink down into. A lamp covered in starburst patterns was set up by a short cabinet just beside the bed, reminding him a bit of Moon's puffy leggings. A small bookshelf that came up to his neck took up the far left corner, just beneath a glow-in-the-dark clock that told him that it was now 5:13 in the afternoon. As he stepped further into the room, he saw a closet set to the left of the door, opening up to reveal rows of empty hangers, waiting to be assigned to a set of clothes and organized into neat sectors. Gregory could only stand there, stunned by the sudden tears in his eyes. It was so much more than he had been expecting to be given, and that alone made a lump form in his throat. I've been trying to adopt for a while, Miss Anderson mumbled timidly in the doorframe, but having you here is so much more than I could ever ask for. Her eyebrows raised when she saw the look on his face, saying, Oh, dear, are you okay? Did I do something wrong? No. Gregory rubbed his wrist into his eyes. No, I'm just... Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Just do whatever you need to make yourself at home, Miss Anderson said, backing up out of the room. If you think of anything you want to get from your house, just tell me and I'll get it for you. Yeah, thank you, ma'am, Gregory said, watching her close the door and disappear. He kept on waiting for things to change. He kept on waiting for her to bust back in and show her true colors. But she didn't. This was all his now. Gregory picked his way around his new room, opening and closing each drawer to see neatly folded pants and shirts in a size small enough to fit him. He didn't touch anything yet on the bookshelf, but he skimmed over the various titles, coming to understand that they were all children's books, ones that he would be more interested in later. He kept prodding around, expecting to find something hidden under the bed or within the shelves of the closet, maybe a dead mouse or rotten old baseboards or an infestation of spiders. But there wasn't anything like that at all. The room was completely clean, each feature proudly presenting itself with absolutely nothing to hide. He found himself climbing into bed, the softness of the blankets and the squish of the pillow drawing him in as he wrapped himself up in warm, undeniable comfort. He was so tired, he didn't even have the energy to get back up and turn off the lights before he fell asleep. Gregory could only hope that all of this wouldn't be ripped away by the time he woke up. Yay! We're finally getting onto happiness with Gregory. He's safe. Okay, so, again, this episode is posted super early because I'm sorry about being really late with the other one, so we posted it directly after the previous one, so, okay, so the next episode should be just at a normal schedule, unless if anything crazy happens, because every time I say that, something crazy happens. One time it's like school is starting, or like another time it's when I get sick, and then... So I'm going to attempt to do it just normally, where it's like once every 2 weeks, but hopefully, man, I don't want to jinx it, because every time I say I'm going to do it normally, a normal schedule, something happens. But anyway, but before you leave, remember to like and comment about your favorite part and everything. It's just a small thing that you can do to pitch in and help me out, because, the channel isn't really doing as good as I thought it would. And I'm finally am monetized, so I am actually getting money for this, and I do need to justify the time that I spend on this channel. So please do share it with your friends and subscribe and like and comment and all of that YouTuber stuff that we usually say. So I love you guys. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for helping me get to where I am today. Bye. See you next time.